Marcus Kane hadn't planned on stopping at the Dusty Rose Diner that evening. He and his crew, 5 other riders from the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club, had been on the road for nearly 6 hours, making their way back from a charity run 2 counties over. The event had been a success, raising money for a children's hospital, meeting families, seeing smiles on kids' faces who were fighting battles far bigger than themselves. It was the kind of day that reminded Marcus why he'd founded the club in the first place, why he'd turned his back on the darker parts of his past and chosen a different path. But now, with the sun setting and stomachs growling, they needed fuel, both for themselves and their bikes. The Dusty Rose was exactly the kind of place Marcus had passed 1,000 times in his life. Weathered, unassuming, the kind of establishment that served strong coffee and stronger opinions. As the motorcycles rumbled into the parking lot, their engines creating a low thunder that turned a few heads inside, Marcus felt the familiar weight of judgment that often accompanied their arrival anywhere. He was used to it. The leather, the tattoos, the sheer size of their group. It all painted a picture in people's minds before they'd even exchanged a word. Most of the time, Marcus let it roll off his back. He knew who he was, knew what his crew stood for, and that was enough. They dismounted with the easy coordination of men who'd ridden together for years, the kind of brotherhood that didn't need constant words to affirm its strength. Danny, the youngest of the group at 26, was already complaining about the heat. Reese, built like a linebacker with a surprisingly gentle demeanor, was checking his phone for messages from his wife. Miguel and Travis were debating the best route home, while Jack, the oldest at 53 and the club's unofficial philosopher, was simply stretching his back and taking in the evening air. They were tired, hungry, and looking forward to nothing more complicated than a decent meal and the final stretch of highway home. Marcus was halfway to the diner entrance when he heard it. Not words exactly, but the tone. Sharp, aggressive, the particular edge in a voice that makes anyone who's lived through violence recognize it instantly. He paused, his hand on the door handle, and turned back toward the parking lot. That's when he saw them. The boy and the man, standing near a battered pickup truck that looked like it had seen better decades. The scene might have appeared unremarkable to someone passing quickly by, a father and son, perhaps, having a conversation. But Marcus had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and every instinct he had was now screaming that something was wrong. The man was tall and wiry, with the kind of gaunt frame that spoke of either hard living or hard substances, possibly both. His face was flushed, whether from anger or alcohol Marcus couldn't tell from this distance, but the aggressive set of his shoulders was unmistakable. He loomed over the boy, his finger jabbing toward the child's chest in sharp, accusatory gestures. And the boy, God, the boy looked so small. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, wearing clothes that were too big and too dirty, his hair unkempt and his face bearing the hollow look of a child who'd learned to expect pain instead of comfort. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Behind him, he sensed rather than saw his crew stopping as well, their attention drawn by the same magnetic pull of wrongness that had caught him. Danny moved up beside Marcus, his easy smile fading as he took in the scene. "That doesn't look good," he murmured, and Marcus nodded without taking his eyes off the boy. For a moment, Marcus wrestled with himself. He'd spent years learning when to intervene and when to let things be, understanding that not every situation that looked bad was actually his business. He'd been accused of overstepping before, of letting his protective instincts override common sense. But then the man grabbed the boy's arm. Not gently, not in the way a parent guides a child, but with a sudden, vicious grip that made the boy cry out. The sound cut through the parking lot like breaking glass, and Marcus felt something solidify in his chest. Business or not, this was happening right in front of him, and he was done pretending not to see. He started walking toward them, his crew falling into step behind him without needing to be asked. Their presence alone, 6 large men moving with unified purpose, changed the energy of the parking lot immediately. The few other people who'd been lingering near their cars suddenly found reasons to head inside. But Marcus kept his focus on the man and the boy, reading the situation with every step. The man had noticed them now, his hand still gripping the boy's arm, his expression shifting from anger to wariness as he calculated the odds he was suddenly facing. "Evening," Marcus called out as he approached, keeping his voice neutral, non-threatening, but firm. He stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to be present, but far enough not to immediately escalate the situation. Everything all right over here? The man's eyes narrowed, and Marcus could see him assessing. Looking at the leather cuts they wore, the patches that identified them as Iron Riders, the size and number of the group. For a moment, Marcus thought the man might respond with aggression, might make this confrontation physical. But instead, something calculating crossed his features, and he released the boy's arm with exaggerated casualness. "Mind your own business," the man said, his words slightly slurred. "Just dealing with family matters. Nothing that concerns you or your club." The way he said club carried a sneer, an assumption of criminality that Marcus had heard too many times to count. But he let it slide, because this wasn't about his pride. This was about the boy, who had taken several instinctive steps back the moment he was released, putting distance between himself and the man who'd been gripping him. The child's eyes were fixed on Marcus now with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. A drowning person spotting a potential rescue. "I understand," Marcus replied evenly, "but the boy seems upset. Just want to make sure everyone's safe." He shifted his gaze deliberately to the child. "You okay, son?" It was the simplest question, asked in the gentlest tone Marcus could manage given the tension crackling through the air. And it was apparently the boy's breaking point. Whatever careful control he'd been maintaining shattered. His face crumpled, tears spilling over his cheeks, and suddenly he was moving. Not away from Marcus as the man barked at him to stay put, but toward him. The boy covered the distance in seconds, his small frame colliding with Marcus's leg as he wrapped his arms around it and pressed his face into the leather of Marcus's pants. "Please," the boy sobbed, his voice muffled but desperate. "Please don't leave me with him. Please." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked down at the trembling child clinging to him, then back up at the man, whose face had gone from wary to furious in an instant. The parking lot seemed to hold its breath. Behind Marcus, he felt his crew shifting, their protective instincts fully engaged now. Reese had moved slightly to the side, positioning himself to intercept if the man tried to grab the boy. Jack had his phone out, already filming. A practice they'd learned was essential in situations that could quickly become he said she said. Miguel and Travis had spread out slightly, creating a subtle barrier. And Danny, sweet-natured Danny who loved kids and volunteered at the youth center every weekend, looked like he was ready to throw hands if necessary. "Tyler, get over here right now," the man snarled, taking a step forward. But he stopped when Marcus shifted his stance slightly, not threateningly, but definitely positioning himself more fully between the man and the boy. "He's my nephew," the man continued, his tone shifting to something attempting reasonableness but failing miserably. "Been having behavioral problems. Kid's dramatic, makes up stories. This is none of your concern." Marcus felt the boy, Tyler, apparently, tense against his leg, the small arms tightening their grip. And in that moment, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that whatever story this man was selling, it was built on lies. He'd seen enough genuine fear in his life to recognize it, and this child was genuinely terrified. "I appreciate you explaining that," Marcus said carefully, his mind racing through options and potential consequences. "But I think maybe we should let the boy catch his breath for a minute. He seems pretty shaken up. What he needs is discipline," the man shot back, his voice rising. "And I don't need some thug telling me how to handle my family." The word thug hung in the air, and Marcus saw Travis bristle beside him. But before anyone could respond, Jack's calm voice cut through the tension. "Sir, I've got you on camera threatening to physically discipline a crying child in a public parking lot. Now, I don't know what your relationship to this boy is, but I'm fairly certain that if we were to call local authorities right now, which we're happy to do, they want to ask both of you some questions. Separately." It was exactly the right move. The mention of authorities, of official involvement, of being questioned separately, it all added up to something the man clearly didn't want. His face went through a series of expressions: anger, calculation, worry. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a different tactic. "Look, we've been on the road for hours. The kid's tired. I'm tired. We both lost our tempers a bit. It happens. Tyler, stop embarrassing both of us and get in the truck." But Tyler didn't move except to somehow press even closer to Marcus, his whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. And that, more than anything else, told Marcus everything he needed to know about the truth of the situation. A child might be dramatic, might throw a tantrum or act out. But this level of fear, this desperate clinging to a complete stranger rather than going with a supposed family member, that spoke to something much darker. Marcus crouched down slowly, bringing himself closer to the boy's level while keeping his awareness on the man in front of them. "Tyler," he said softly, "my name is Marcus. Can you look at me for a second?" The boy raised his tear-stained face, his eyes red and swollen, his nose running. Marcus pulled a clean bandana from his pocket and offered it. "Here, buddy, take a breath." Tyler took the bandana with shaking hands, wiping his face. "I need you to be really brave right now and answer a question honestly, okay? Are you safe with this man? Do you want to go with him?" "No," Tyler whispered, but the word carried absolute conviction. "No, please. He hurts me. He gets drunk and he hurts me, and my mom doesn't. She doesn't stop him." Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. "I don't want to go back there." The confession hit the parking lot like a bomb. Marcus felt rage surge through him, hot, fierce, and barely controllable. But he forced himself to stay calm, to stay focused, because losing his temper now wouldn't help this child. Behind him, he heard Reese on the phone, his voice low but urgent as he spoke with what Marcus assumed was emergency services. Good. This had gone beyond something they could handle on their own. This needed official intervention, needed protection that could follow Tyler home and ensure this didn't happen again. The man's face had gone pale, then flushed dark red. "He's lying," he spat. "The kid's a pathological liar. Ask anyone. His teacher, his social worker. He makes up stories for attention." "Then you won't mind waiting here until the police arrive to sort it all out," Marcus replied evenly, rising to his full height while keeping one hand resting gently on Tyler's shoulder. "If everything's as you say, it'll all get cleared up quickly." "I'm not waiting for anything," the man growled, taking another step forward. "That's my nephew, and I'm taking him home." "No, you're not." The words came out harder than Marcus intended, carrying all the authority of a man who'd spent decades learning when to stand firm. The man froze, reading the absolute resolve in Marcus's stance, in the positioning of the 5 other bikers who had moved into a loose semicircle around them. It was 6 against 1, and if it came to physical confrontation, the outcome wasn't in question. The man seemed to realize this, his hands clenching into fists at his sides, his breathing heavy with barely suppressed fury. "You're making a big mistake," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous and cold. "You don't know what you're getting into. That boy belongs with family, and the law's going to side with family every time. All you're doing is traumatizing him more and getting yourselves in trouble for interfering." "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged, "but I'm willing to take that chance. Because right now, looking at this scared child, hearing what he said, I know that letting you take him would be the bigger mistake. One I couldn't live with." The standoff continued, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Tyler had gone quiet against Marcus's leg, his breathing shallow, his whole body rigid with the terror of what might happen next. Marcus kept his gaze locked on the man, watching for any sign of a lunge, any indication that this might turn physical. The parking lot had completely cleared now, other patrons having moved inside or driven away, leaving just this small group in the gathering darkness. Then, from the distance, came the sound Marcus had been waiting for, sirens. The man heard them too, his head snapping toward the road, his expression cycling through rage, fear, and calculation. For a moment, Marcus thought he might try to make a run for it, but instead, he seemed to deflate slightly, his shoulders dropping as he recognized he'd lost this particular battle. "You're going to regret this," he said, his voice low and venomous. "All of you. This isn't over." "I can live with that," Marcus replied quietly. "As long as this boy is safe, I can live with whatever comes next." The police arrived 3 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulling into the parking lot with lights flashing, but sirens now silenced. Marcus watched as 2 officers emerged, their hands resting casually on their belts as they assessed the scene before them. He could only imagine what it looked like. 6 bikers, 1 agitated man, and a small boy clinging to a stranger's leg like his life depended on it. It wasn't a typical call, that much was certain. "Evening," the first officer said, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "We got a call about a child welfare situation. Who wants to tell me what's going on here?" Everyone started talking at once. The man insisting this was all a misunderstanding, that Marcus and his crew had interfered with his family business, that Tyler was his nephew, and he had every right to take him home. Marcus and his crew tried to explain what they'd witnessed, how Tyler had begged not to be left with this man, how the fear in the boy's eyes was genuine and terrifying. But it was Tyler himself who ultimately cut through the noise. "He hits me," the boy said, his voice small but steady as he looked up at the officer. "When he drinks. And he drinks a lot. He tells me if I tell anyone, he'll hurt my mom. But I don't want to go with him. I'm scared." The parking lot fell silent. The officer crouched down, her expression softening as she met Tyler's eyes. "Okay, sweetheart. We're going to figure this out, I promise. You're safe now. Nobody's going to make you go anywhere you don't feel safe." She looked up at her partner, and some wordless communication passed between them. The partner moved toward the man, asking for identification, beginning the process of documentation and investigation. The next hour passed in a blur of statements and questions. Child Protective Services was called. Tyler's mother was contacted. A phone call that revealed she'd been frantically searching for Tyler for the past 3 hours, ever since her brother had shown up drunk and insisted on taking the boy for a drive. The relief in her voice when she learned he was safe was genuine enough, but there were questions about why she'd let her brother take Tyler in the first place, about what she knew of his treatment of her son, about her ability to protect her child going forward. Through it all, Tyler stayed close to Marcus, his small hand clutching Marcus's larger one with desperate strength. The bikers stayed too, every single one of them, giving statements and waiting to ensure Tyler's safety was secured. They missed their dinner, missed their timeline for getting home, but none of them complained. This was more important than convenience or schedules. This was about a child's life, about standing in the gap when standing was needed most. When the social worker finally arrived, a tired-looking woman named Susan who nonetheless greeted Tyler with genuine warmth. Marcus felt the boy's grip on his hand tighten to almost painful levels. Tyler looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Where are they taking me?" he whispered. "Please, I don't want to go back there." Marcus crouched down one more time, his knees protesting after the long day of riding and the stress of the evening. "Listen to me, Tyler. These people, the police, the social worker, they're good people whose job is to keep you safe. They're going to make sure your uncle can't hurt you anymore. And they're going to talk to your mom about how to make sure you're protected." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I can't promise you everything will be perfect, but I can promise you that what happened tonight changed things. People know now. People are watching. And you were so brave to speak up. But what if they don't believe me?" Tyler's voice cracked. "My uncle said nobody would believe me." "I believe you," Marcus said firmly. "Every person here believes you. And I promise you, we're not going to forget about you. We're going to make sure these folks follow through." He looked up at Susan, the social worker, who nodded her understanding and agreement. The story could have ended in that parking lot. For many people, that moment of intervention, calling the police, ensuring the boy wasn't taken by someone who hurt him, giving statements, and then riding off into the sunset, would have been enough. The conscience could rest easy knowing they'd done the right thing in the moment. But Marcus Kane had learned something important over his 51 years of life. Doing the right thing in a single moment and actually making a lasting difference were two very separate accomplishments. The first required courage. The second required commitment. 3 days after the incident at the Dusty Rose Diner, Marcus sat in his small office at the Iron Riders Clubhouse, staring at the business card Susan Chun, the social worker, had given him before they'd parted ways that night. He'd been thinking about Tyler constantly, wondering where the boy was, whether he was safe, whether his intervention had actually helped or merely delayed an inevitable return to a dangerous situation. The not knowing gnawed at him, and he'd finally decided he needed to follow up, even if it meant hearing difficult answers. He dialed the number, half expecting to get voicemail or to be brushed off with vague assurances about confidentiality and ongoing investigations. Instead, Susan picked up on the second ring, and when Marcus identified himself, her tone warmed immediately. "Mr. Kane, I was actually hoping you'd call. I wanted to thank you again for what you did. It's not every day that strangers step in like that." "How is he?" Marcus asked, cutting straight to what mattered. "Tyler, is he okay?" There was a pause, and Marcus could hear the sound of papers shuffling. "I can't give you all the details due to privacy regulations," Susan said carefully. But what I can tell you is that Tyler is currently in protective custody while we investigate the situation more thoroughly. His uncle has been charged with child endangerment and assault, and there's a restraining order in place. As for Tyler's mother, she sighed, the sound carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too many complicated family situations. She's cooperating with the investigation. I think your intervention was a wake-up call for her about just how bad things had gotten. But he's safe? Tyler's safe right now. Marcus pressed. He's safe, Susan confirmed. He's staying with a foster family. Good people who have experience with trauma-affected children. But Mr. Kane, I want to be honest with you. The boy keeps asking about you. About the bikers who helped him. He's having nightmares, struggling to settle in. And when he's upset, he talks about wanting to see Marcus and his friends. Normally I wouldn't share this, but she paused again, seeming to weigh her words carefully. Kids like Tyler don't trust easily. The fact that he's reaching for the memory of you as a safe person, that's actually a positive sign in terms of his capacity to form protective attachments. I wondered if you might be willing to visit him, just once, to help him understand that you didn't just disappear, that you care about what happens to him. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He'd been around long enough to know that getting emotionally invested in people's problems, especially children's problems, could lead to heartbreak. The system was imperfect, outcomes were uncertain, and he couldn't save everyone. But he also knew that Tyler had looked at him in that parking lot with eyes that begged not to be abandoned, and Marcus had made an unspoken promise in that moment. Promises, to Marcus, meant something. Yes, he said simply. When and where? The visit was arranged for the following Saturday afternoon. Marcus showed up at the address Susan had given him, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, with a mixture of nervousness and determination. He'd brought Danny with him. The younger biker had also been asking about Tyler, and Marcus figured the boy might appreciate seeing another familiar face. They debated bringing a gift, eventually settling on a sturdy backpack filled with some books, colored pencils, and a small stuffed motorcycle that Danny had found at a shop that benefited a children's charity. The foster mother who answered the door was a warm-faced woman in her 50s named Patricia. She smiled when she saw them, though Marcus noticed her quick assessment of their appearance. The leather, the tattoos, the size of them. To her credit, whatever concerns she might have had were set aside quickly. Tyler's been watching the window for the past hour, she said, stepping aside to let them in. He's nervous, but he's also excited. Please, come in. The house was comfortable and lived in, filled with the kind of touches that spoke of a real home. Family photos on the walls, a well-worn couch, the smell of something baking in the kitchen. And sitting on that couch, looking impossibly small in an oversized sweater, was Tyler. He looked up when Marcus and Danny entered, his eyes widening, and for a moment nobody moved. Then Tyler was scrambling off the couch and running toward them, and Marcus crouched down just in time to catch the boy as he crashed into him. You came, Tyler said, his voice muffled against Marcus's shoulder. I didn't know if you were real. I kept thinking maybe I imagined it. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion he hadn't expected. I'm real, buddy. We're real. And we wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay. He gently pulled back to look at Tyler's face. The boy still looked tired, still carried shadows in his eyes that no child should have. But there was also something different, a small spark of hope that hadn't been there in the parking lot. They spent the next 2 hours in Patricia's living room, talking and slowly watching Tyler relax. Danny, with his natural gift for connecting with kids, had Tyler laughing within 30 minutes, telling stories about their motorcycle rides and the charity events the Iron Riders participated in. They showed him pictures on their phones of the club's work with children's hospitals and veteran organizations. Tyler was fascinated, asking question after question, especially about the motorcycles themselves. Could I ride one someday? He asked, his eyes bright with a child's wonder that had been buried under trauma but not completely extinguished. When you're old enough and if your mom says it's okay, absolutely, Marcus replied. But for now, we thought you might like this. He pulled out the stuffed motorcycle, and Tyler's face lit up in a way that made the entire visit worthwhile. As the afternoon wore on, Tyler grew more comfortable, more willing to talk about what had happened and how he was feeling. He spoke about his nightmares, about being scared his uncle would find him, about worrying that his mom was mad at him for telling. Patricia listened with the practiced patience of someone who'd heard countless children's fears and she gently reassured him while also being honest that things were still being figured out. But it was something Marcus said, almost without thinking, that seemed to have the biggest impact. Tyler had asked, his voice very small, whether Marcus thought he was a bad kid for getting his uncle in trouble. Marcus had leaned forward, making sure Tyler was looking directly at him, and spoke with an intensity that left no room for doubt. Tyler, you listen to me. You are not bad. Not even a little bit. What happened to you was wrong, and speaking up about it was one of the bravest things anyone could do. Adults, grown men and women, struggle to find the courage to tell the truth when they're being hurt. You're 7 years old, and you did it anyway. That doesn't make you bad. That makes you a hero. The word hero hung in the air, and Marcus watched as Tyler's expression shifted through disbelief, hope, and finally cautious acceptance. The boy reached out and took Marcus's hand, holding it like an anchor. Could you come back, he asked. To visit again? Marcus looked at Patricia, who nodded her permission, then back at Tyler. Yeah, buddy, we can come back. As long as it's okay with Patricia and Susan and your mom, we'll come visit you. You're not alone in this. That was the moment, Marcus would later reflect, when his involvement shifted from a one-time intervention to an ongoing commitment. The visits became regular. Every couple of weeks, Marcus and usually one or two other members of the Iron Riders would stop by to see Tyler. They came bearing books and puzzles, shared stories and laughter, and provided something Tyler desperately needed: consistent, reliable, safe male presence in his life. The weeks turned into months, and Tyler's case worked its way through the system. His uncle was prosecuted and sentenced to 2 years in prison for child endangerment, with a permanent restraining order preventing contact with Tyler afterward. Tyler's mother, after weeks of counseling and supervision, was deemed capable of safely parenting her son, provided she continued therapy and maintained complete separation from her brother. The court issued a reunification plan with graduated steps and oversight. Throughout it all, Marcus and his crew stayed involved. They attended court hearings, not officially, just present in the gallery as a quiet show of support. They connected Tyler's mother with resources, helped her find a new apartment in a different part of town, even organized a fundraiser through the Iron Riders to help cover moving costs and first month's rent. It wasn't about taking over or replacing family. It was about being a safety net, a community support that Tyler and his mother could rely on. Susan Chun, the social worker, later told Marcus that their involvement had made a measurable difference in the case outcome. I've worked hundreds of child protection cases, she said during one of their phone updates, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen community members follow through like this. Usually, people help in the moment, which is wonderful and important, but then they disappear. You and your club have shown Tyler that people care about him beyond that first crisis moment. That matters more than you probably realize. The transformation in Tyler over those months was remarkable to witness. The hollow-eyed, terrified child who'd hidden behind Marcus in a parking lot slowly gave way to a boy who could laugh freely, who talked excitedly about school and friends, who'd started calling Marcus Uncle Marcus, with Patricia's amused blessing. There were still hard days, still nightmares and moments of fear. Trauma doesn't disappear on a convenient timeline. But Tyler was healing, and he had a network of support around him now that hadn't existed before one summer evening when desperation drove him to trust a stranger. 6 months after that initial parking lot confrontation, Tyler was officially returned to his mother's full-time custody. Marcus attended the final hearing. Tyler had specifically asked if he'd be there, and watched as the judge signed off on the reunification order. Tyler's mother approached him afterward, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You saved my son's life. You gave me a chance to be the mother I should have been all along. I'll never forget what you did. Marcus, uncomfortable with the praise, had simply nodded and told her the truth. That Tyler was the brave one, that she'd done the hard work of getting help and making changes, and that he hoped things would continue to get better. But as Tyler ran up to him and Danny, chattering excitedly about his new room in the new apartment and the bike-themed bedding Marcus's crew had bought him as a welcome home gift, Marcus felt something profound settle in his chest. This was what it meant to make a difference that mattered. Not just stopping something bad in a single moment, but showing up repeatedly, being present through the messy, complicated process of healing and rebuilding. The Iron Riders made a group decision to maintain contact with Tyler and his mother. They established what Danny jokingly called honorary membership for Tyler. He received his own small leather vest, child-sized and age-appropriate, with a patch that read Iron Riders Family, received invitations to the club's family-friendly events, and was included in the Christmas gift drives and summer barbecues. His mother, initially hesitant about the bikers' continued presence in their lives, came to appreciate the genuine care and support they offered. She later joined them in volunteering at some of their charity events, wanting to pay forward the kindness she'd received. Marcus watched as Tyler grew and thrived over the following years. The boy who'd once been so broken by trauma that he desperately clung to a stranger's leg became a confident teenager who talked about wanting to start his own nonprofit someday to help other kids in bad situations. He still had challenges. Trauma had left its marks, and some scars ran deep. But he also had resilience, hope, and a belief that the world contained people who would stand up for what was right. For years after that parking lot incident, at the Iron Riders' annual charity event for children's services, Marcus stood on a small stage to give his usual brief remarks about the importance of community support for vulnerable kids. But this year, Tyler, now 11 years old and self-assured in a way that would have been unimaginable to anyone who'd known him back then, had asked if he could say something too. Marcus had agreed, not knowing what the boy planned to share. Tyler took the microphone with only slight nervousness and looked out at the crowd of bikers, supporters, families, and community members. "A lot of you don't know me," he began, his voice steady. "But 4 years ago, I was a really scared kid in a really bad situation. I thought nobody cared, that nobody would help me, that I didn't matter. But then these bikers," he gestured to where Marcus and the other Iron Riders stood. "They saw me, and they didn't look away. They didn't pretend not to notice. Marcus and his friends saved my life that day. But even more than that, they kept showing up afterward. They taught me that being brave means standing up even when it's hard, and that real strength is about protecting people who need it." He paused, looking directly at Marcus with an expression of gratitude so pure it made Marcus's eyes sting with unshed tears. "I want to say thank you, and I want to tell everyone here that what you're doing with these charity events and fundraisers, it matters. Because kids like me are out there right now, scared and alone, and they need to know that people care. They need heroes. And sometimes heroes wear leather and ride motorcycles." The crowd erupted in applause, but Marcus barely heard it. He was looking at Tyler, at this brave, articulate, hopeful young man who'd survived hell and come out believing in the goodness of people. It was, Marcus thought, the most powerful testament possible to what ordinary people could accomplish when they simply chose not to walk away from someone else's pain. Later that evening, as the event wound down and families headed home, Tyler approached Marcus one more time. "Uncle Marcus," he said. He still called him that, and Marcus had long since stopped trying to correct him. "I've been thinking about something. I want to do what you do someday. Not necessarily ride motorcycles, though that would be cool, but help people. Stand up for kids who need someone. Is that weird?" Marcus crouched down to Tyler's level despite the boy being much taller now, wanting to make sure Tyler saw the absolute sincerity in his response. "That's not weird at all, buddy. That's exactly what the world needs more of. And I have no doubt you'll do amazing things." He paused, then added, "You've already done amazing things. You spoke up when it was terrifying. You trusted when you had every reason not to. You healed even though it was hard. Those are all things that a lot of adults never learn how to do. I'm proud of you, Tyler. Really proud." Tyler hugged him, and in that embrace, Marcus felt the full weight of what had started on a random Tuesday evening in a parking lot. A choice to pay attention, a decision to stand between a child and harm, a commitment to follow through beyond the initial moment of crisis. It hadn't been convenient. It had cost time, emotional energy, and forced Marcus to stay engaged with a complicated, sometimes frustrating system. But looking at Tyler now, safe, healing, hopeful, Marcus knew without a doubt that it had been worth every bit of effort. As Marcus rode home that night, the familiar rumble of his motorcycle beneath him and the stars bright overhead, he thought about all the other Tylers out there. Kids in danger, kids who were scared, kids who desperately needed someone to see them and choose to act. He couldn't save them all. No one could. The problems were too big, too systemic, too deeply rooted in issues way beyond what a motorcycle club could address. but he could save the ones right in front of him. He could choose not to look away when it would be easier to keep walking. He could show up, again and again, when consistency mattered more than heroic gestures. It was a lesson Marcus had learned from Tyler as much as Tyler had learned from him, that healing isn't a moment, it's a process. That protection isn't just about stopping immediate harm, it's about building a network of safety that lasts beyond the crisis. That being a hero isn't about wearing a cape or having superpowers. It's about seeing someone's humanity when they're at their most vulnerable and choosing to honor it with your actions. The story of the boy who hid behind a biker and said, "Please don't leave me with him," became something of a legend within the Iron Riders, told to new members as an example of what the club stood for. But for Marcus, it was never just a story. It was a reminder, carried with him always, of why the hard choices, the ones that require follow-through and sacrifice and showing up even when it's inconvenient, are the ones that matter most. Tyler's path wouldn't be perfect. Marcus knew enough about trauma to understand that healing wasn't linear, that there would be setbacks and struggles ahead. But Tyler wasn't facing those challenges alone anymore. He had his mother, who'd found her own strength and commitment to protecting her child. He had Patricia, who'd become a family friend and continued to check in regularly. He had Susan and the other social workers who'd fought for his well-being. And he had the Iron Riders, a chosen family of rough-edged men who'd proven that beneath the leather and tattoos beat hearts capable of profound gentleness and unwavering loyalty. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to walk away. To plant your feet when someone needs you to stand. To look into a child's terrified eyes and say, without words but with absolute conviction, "I see you. I believe you. I won't let you face this alone." That parking lot confrontation had been 4 years ago now, but its ripples continued spreading outward. In Tyler's healing, in his mother's transformation, in the lives of other children the Iron Riders had helped since then because Tyler's case had shown them how much difference they could make. As Marcus pulled into his driveway and shut off his motorcycle, the night quiet around him, he felt something he didn't always allow himself to feel: satisfaction. Not pride, exactly, though there was some of that, but a deep sense that his life, with all its messy complications and imperfections, had purpose. That the choices he made, to pay attention, to intervene, to follow through, rippled outward in ways that made the world incrementally better. The boy who'd hidden behind him in that parking lot was safe now. Thriving, even. And that single fact, born from one man's decision not to walk past someone else's pain, had changed the trajectory of a young life in ways that would echo for decades to come. It was, Marcus thought as he headed inside to finally rest, enough. More than enough. It was everything that mattered.